The Biden administration director of the National Economic Council, his name is Brian Deese. He was deployed by the Biden administration to try to smooth this over, to try to lie to us and tell us that even though we're facing 9.1% inflation, it's not actually that bad. And the Biden administration has a solution for it. The problem is his solution is totally bananas.
How long are we going to keep saying this is the worst of it?
Well, look, a couple points on today's report, as you just said. The first is, it's backward looking, and it doesn't reflect what we've seen over the last 30 days, which is a significant decline in gas prices, down about 40 cents. That June report, about half of it was driven by energy prices, and we've seen moderation since. But the second point is that in the core, inflation remains too high, which is why we need action. And I just want to underscore, if there's one thing to take away from this report, it's that there is more urgency now than ever in Congress moving to pass a bill to try to build more domestic semiconductors, to try to bring down the price of those goods. You see across this report things like used cars and new vehicles, those prices holding up. That is not principally driven by demand. It's driven by supply and constrained supply. We know how to solve that. We should have solved that months ago, but we now have a moment. We need to do that. If there's any takeaway from this report, it should be that.
Although that brings us right back to the circular argument, Brian, that more spending is not what you typically do in the face of high inflation. How do we break out of that circle?
No, look, I think you have to look at the unique situation that we're in as an economy and think about how do we build more supply? How do we increase the productive capacity of our economy so that we actually can supply more goods, bring prices down? We know the answer on semiconductors exactly. We need more supply of those goods. You were just talking about housing, same issue. Obviously, mortgage rates are going to increase as the Fed continues to tighten. But as we do that, we need to keep home builders building supply, because we know that at core, the housing issue is a lack of affordable supply. It's been a decade or more in the making, but as we move through this transition, providing incentives, for example, for builders to continue to build affordable homes, as we do so, that's out of the traditional box of fiscal, Keynesian fiscal stimulus. It's more about how do we actually invest to build more capability here in the country that will help bring down prices in areas like semiconductors and housing.
It's actually almost impressive that he packed that much ignorance and that many falsehoods, that many misleading narratives into what was this? This video was 2 minutes and 10 seconds. First of all, what we're facing in our country is not unique. We're not some anomaly, an economic anomaly where the rules of economics don't apply to us. I just laid it out. I laid out the concept of what causes inflation. And of course that applies to us. Why would we view ourselves in the United States, our economy, as somehow so unique that if you print money you don't have, it won't lead to devaluing of currency, which won't lead to inflation? It's ridiculous. That's a complete lie. Second of all, he talks about energy prices and how energy prices are the driver of this inflation. And part of that is true, but it doesn't paint the whole story. The whole story is we were energy independent under President Trump. And what did Joe Biden do? What was his deliberate political choice when he took office? He made us rely on foreign oil. He refuses to drill. He refuses to open these pipelines. He made us dependent on foreign oil. So yeah, that does play into it then when Russia invades Ukraine. That shouldn't impact us, except that we are reliant on foreign oil, which we shouldn't be. The third thing that Brian Deese says, which is bananas, bonkers to me, is he talks about how the semiconductor shortage is driven by supply, that this isn't a demand issue. And really what he should say here, again, this is completely misleading that he acts like this is some intangible problem with supply. No, it's because we are reliant on China for things that we shouldn't be reliant on China for. It's dangerous to be reliant on China to the extent that we are. And if we rely on China for semiconductors, then at China's smallest whim, they can stifle supply. They can stop supplying us with something that we need for our economy. They can play a part in throwing our economy into the problems that we are facing right now. Now, where does Biden play into this? Biden is extremely soft on China. Biden's son Hunter has financial ties to China. We're talking billions of dollars of financial ties to China. And after Hunter Biden secured those billions of dollars of deals with entities tied to the Chinese Communist Party, Joe Biden's positions on China itself, especially on trade, softened. These are a result of Biden's deliberate political decisions. The other part of this supply issue is if you just blame the supply chain itself, our brittle supply chain, or even if you couple it with COVID and say, well, COVID disrupted our supply chain because our supply chain was brittle. Well, again, why are we relying on China for our supply? And most of the disruption to our supply chain wasn't a result of the virus itself. It was a result of the government policies, the lockdowns, the government shutting down businesses and manufacturing plants and forcibly grinding our economy to a halt. The fourth problem with what Brian D said, again, I said it was kind of impressive that he packed all of this misinformation, all of this nonsense into 2 minutes and 10 seconds. When he says the phrase, we have to provide incentives for builders to build affordable homes, that should make everyone's red flags just go up. Everyone's warning bells clang, clang, clang. What does provide incentives mean, Brian? What does that phrase mean? Can you put that in a different word? If you use different words to portray the same meaning, provide incentives means that the government subsidizes builders. The government subsidizes builders. And if you deconstruct that phrase, the government subsidizing means that the government uses our money in a redistribution of wealth type scheme, and they're spending money that they don't have because they're not probably going to raise taxes to do that. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to pass stimulus that they don't have the money to pay for, and they're going to print the money and spend the money. And so what do we have here? We have Brian Deese of the Biden administration. He's the White House director of the National Economic Council, and his solution to the 9.1% inflation that we are facing today is to continue spending, to spend more money, to print more money. Are you serious? This is just going to cause this to continue. It's going to cause inflation to continue to grow. It's going to hurt us more, cost us more money when we do anything, when we buy airfare, when we have to heat our homes, when we try to purchase a car, when we try to feed our families. And he wants to spend more money, and he wants to make this worse.